Hello, everyone. Thane Rosenbaum here, Creative Director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro University. And welcome to the FOLCS Headlines Series. Tonight, the new labor movement. For those of you who've been paying attention, there is a revitalization of unions in America, mostly initiated by young workers, very tech-savvy, Gen Z affiliated largely, in a true grassroots organization that is not even affiliated with the traditional union, established unions. And you've heard about this with Amazon and Starbucks, essential workers who felt devalued during the pandemic and have now come together in an effort to collectively bargain to improve their working conditions, their staffing shortages, minimum wage disputes that they have. Of course, everyone knows about supply chain disruptions. So there's much on their minds, and that they're looking to renegotiate their experience as workers, as laborers. We have tonight two special guests from the Starbucks, what's called the Starbucks Workers United, the two women who initiated their unions in their respective states. We have Cassie Burke, who is a barista in Rhode Island, and that particular store is the first union in Rhode Island. And we also have Kylah Clay, who's from Boston, Massachusetts, and she's responsible for the unionizing the first store in Massachusetts. I think I've got the numbers right before we welcome you aboard. I think it's over 200 stores have filed petitions with the National Labor Relations Board in, I suspect, 30 states or over 30 states to unionize. And as far as my research says, something like 13 are fully unionized at this point. It might even be higher, but over 200 stores have been seeking a union status. For those of you who have been following the Starbucks news, it started in mid-December with 2 stores in Buffalo, New York. And here we are with over 200 stores around the country. So before we say hello to Kylah and Cassie, if you're watching us live on YouTube, welcome. We love that you're with us. Please, at some point, go to folks.org and sign up for our email list so you can receive advance notice of future events. If you have a question for Cassie or Kylah, you go to the Q&A box and leave your question there. And let's start. First of all, Cassie, welcome. Kylah, welcome. Welcome to Folks. So, so let me just start off with a simple question. What are you looking for? What is this about? Is this just about seeking higher wages, or is there more to this? At some point later, we'll talk about just the American labor movement. But at a simplified level, what initiated, what inspired, motivated, drove this impulse for unionizing, at least at Starbucks?
Well, for us at our store, we had like a brief moment where we had a change of management and pretty much everything kind of fell apart in a week or two. Scheduling became a disaster.
What year was that? Was that recent?
Oh, that was a month and a half ago.
Okay.
And scheduling got incredibly hectic, and everyone was getting their hours cut or put on hours that they weren't available. And I was always someone, I've always been very pro-union, so I kind of just saw an opportunity and I went for it. For our store, a lot of people want things like having our facilities maintained, having, obviously better wages. That's something everyone would want in their life. But there's also just things that happen in the store that we'd like to see done more efficiently and, not done at the last minute. Like, I've had a broken ice machine pretty much since I joined the store 3 months ago. And I think it got fixed last week. So things like that, it's not just wages, but there's a whole, matters of workplace safety and workplace maintenance that are very important to us.
Kylah, and you in Boston, what's important for you that's missing?
I think to echo what Cassie is saying, I think ultimately what we're fighting for is a voice in our workplace conditions and an ability to address the power imbalance between workers and corporate. As it currently stands, all of those problems that Cassie's store has, that a lot of stores have, could be better addressed if we, the baristas on the floor who work at those stores every day, if we actually had a voice. So I think that's what we're all uniting over right now.
So when I hear words like what you've both said, I think of something that I think speaks to maybe the times in which we live and maybe your relative youth. Those sound like dignity issues, that they go beyond the simplified, I would like more money, but you're describing things like voice and power differential. I hear things like that. I think that speaks to almost a human right in addition to a corporate obligation to their employees. Do you agree with that? When you think about the origins of the labor movement, some of the things you're talking about are not what was on the list, right? That having a voice, right, sounds like the sort of thing that one speaks to in the progressive movement in which our political culture seems to be existing.
Well, I would say that workers' rights are human rights, and that dignity is something that we're certainly asking for. But I think that the bare necessities as well are not being met for a lot of workers right now. And we deserve much better than that. And by framing it more as a human rights issue, I think we can look past that corporate powerhouse and think more about the people who are really fueling that and making sure that they're being taken care of and given the dignity that they deserve as humans.
Cassie, do you see it also as not just about dollars and cents, but something that deals with human rights and dignity?
I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways, I've a lot of what I would hope to be human rights are tied up in money. Things like feeding yourself, things like having a place to live. I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers today where she was saying, my hours got cut again. And I literally talked to my boss 2 days ago about how I can't afford to buy food right now. That's one of the type of situations that we need to like eliminate entirely because I know that person, they're a shift lead, they're one of the best workers we have at the store, and they're struggling to buy spam. They're not eating well, they're struggling to buy canned meat, you
But,
know.
but it's confusing to me, at least, because when I think of Starbucks or Amazon or Apple, I think of companies that have benefited wildly during the pandemic, right? I don't think of corporations that need to be cutting back on hours, right? I thought the whole concern is, when I go to my local CVS, I was there recently, there was one person working there. Like there was literally one person. She was holding down the whole place. People just didn't show up. Now I understand that's also an issue. I wonder whether that's partly what's going on, where employees, even at Starbucks, just are not showing up, and it's a very favorably fluid employment market. So you can, you don't fear getting fired. Is that what's going on? I'm just surprised to hear that hours are being cut. I would think they would be looking to hire more people because people are using Starbucks more often. Is that not happening? Why are they hiring more people?
So that's actually been a problem nationally right now across the board. Organizers in every state that we've been able to connect with are also experiencing just understaffing to the point where they're working multiple positions at a time. I know that at my store, we asked our district manager if we could get another barista on the floor during our peak because it is so busy. And he had refused, even though he saw how busy we are during those peaks. We don't have time to get a glass of water.
Wow.
And I think that they can afford to put more people on the floor. They have enough employees. We're a well-staffed store. All the stores I talk to are pretty well-staffed. They're just not getting the hours. And I think part of that is exploitation of their workers to capitalize more on our labor. And I also think there is an ulterior motive that might have something to do with the fact that this union movement has gotten too big for Starbucks to handle, and they're trying to find a way to cut down somehow.
Well, let me just get to that question, and I'll come back to where I was, because you just raised something, Kylah. Are either of you concerned about retaliatory actions by Starbucks? I understand that some employees were fired in Memphis, and I think in Phoenix. It's not unknown that that could happen, especially charismatic leaders like the two of you that appeared on FOLCS. Are you worried that your jobs are in jeopardy because you're on FOLCS Headline Series tonight?
I think being out there in public about what's going on has really given us more protection than if we were staying quiet about it. I've had local politicians reaching out to me. The other day, a congressman DM'd me on Twitter, which is bizarre. But in general, I think it's rational to be afraid of something like that happening because it's happened already to other people. I think Kylah and I both feel pretty secure. We've talked about it already. Just being in this part of the country, Starbucks isn't really as vindictive for some reason, but
I love that. Those Rhode Island people, they just don't take vengeance against each other. Tell me what the Starbucks Workers United is. I'm still a little confused because it is confusing. I'll tell you why it's confusing. First of all, was there a union called Workers United before there was something called Starbucks Workers United? So does that mean that you joined an existing union or developed an existing union that's now being known for Starbucks? That's number one. Number two, in the same answer, I wonder whether you can explain. It does appear as if you're unionizing store by store. You know how I know this? Because the two of you have unionized your store and you're not doing it together. You're doing it individually. So is Starbucks Workers United not a national union? Is it sort of a store by store union?
So the first part of the question is we are a part of Workers United, which was an already established union.
And what kind of union was that?
They're under SEIU, so the service employees. And Starbucks Workers United has kind of developed itself as a recognized campaign through their relationship with Workers United. And with regards to the store by store, yes, we are organizing on a store by store level. In that our contracts will be negotiated individually, but we do have a lot of interconnectivity with all of the different stores. So in Boston, we actually have helped file every single store in the state.
So I'm saying the two of you knew each other before we met tonight, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I reached out to Workers United, Kylah was the one they put me in contact with. I don't think my store would be unionized if Kylah's store didn't get unionized. It's all very collaborative, really.
So the president and former CEO or founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, came out of retirement recently. And my understanding is he came out of retirement to deal with this union issue, right? That didn't seem to exist. He was off, I don't know, fishing somewhere on a yacht, and now he has to come back to work. I find that whole thing sort of interesting because I think, I'm wondering whether if he were here tonight, he would say, "Hey, I'm your daddy. I'm Howard. I called you partners. I never used the words employee. Isn't that great? Who else can say that at other stores, at other companies? I would pay for you to get a college degree at Arizona State University and I'll get you a college degree if you work here. You have expansive health coverage that even included the transgender people at a time where no other employers were thinking of that. We were early on that. You don't need a union. You have me. Just talk to me. Why should there be a third party separating us?" How would you answer him if he said that?
I think there are a few very clear reasons why we need a union. Regardless of what benefits we are getting from Starbucks, and I understand that Starbucks is often looked at as one of the more progressive companies to work for. even if the benefits are good, we have had no involvement in the process of deciding what our benefits are. And ultimately, we're working for Starbucks, we're creating their wealth. We should have a say in what benefits we're getting. We should be a part of that conversation.
As a partner,
As a
right?
partner,
Right. That's
precisely.
it. Right.
It's hypocritical to call us a partner, but to not include us in key conversations about our workplace. And the second part is all of these benefits we have are not protected. We don't have protections in our jobs. We are at-will employees. We can
So just to be clear for the audience, Kylah, you have no contract individually with Starbucks. You can get fired at any point for any reason.
yes.
Yeah.
And so because of
So
that,
you're saying that, so I'm go back to what you're saying. So therefore the benefits are easily lost, forfeited without any protections.
exactly, and not just by losing your job, but there's no requirement that Howard continues to give us our benefits the way that we currently receive them. And we should be able to have a way of ensuring that we can rely on our ability to stay safe in our workplace and our ability to rely on the benefits that we're promised.
So if Howard were here and he said, hey, Kylah, I don't know how many years you've been with us. By the way, Kylah is a law student. She's going to be graduating soon. I'll ask her what her next career path is. It's probably in the union business, perhaps. But I'm wondering whether he would say, Kylah, Cassie, have I ever taken it away? Have I ever deprived you of any benefits before?
Well, to that, I would say I know people who have had that happen to them.
Oh, wow.
You know, I know someone who works in my store who uses the ASU program, and they said that last year their hours.
I'm sorry,
got cut.
ASU is the Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona State University program.
Right, okay. Uh-huh.
And their hours got cut one quarter through no fault of their own. It was just a low quarter for Starbucks. And
I'm sorry, just to be clear, are you saying that they did that to compensate the company for the cost of the tuition?
I'm not sure on the specifics of it. It's just
Okay.
an experience from someone at my store, but their hours got reduced and they fell out of like the accepted range to be in the ASU program in the middle of one of their semesters. And so they just literally had to take their paid time off and just chuck it and just say, you know, throw it in the grinder so that they can keep their ASU benefits, which, you know, that's ridiculous to me. I only found out about that like a week or two after I started the union process, and that was ridiculous in my mind.
So the point is a binding legal contract really does matter. Kylah, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to add that there have been plenty of instances in which we've lost our benefits on a wider scale too. In that, for example, throughout COVID, we were provided a really helpful benefit in that we would be able to get one free drink and one free food item every day, regardless if you were working that day or not. And
What does that mean? I'm sorry. That means that an employee of Starbucks could walk into any store or just your store and get something to eat or drink during the pandemic.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
and nothing, by the way, I'm just curious, if you're working there for the day, are you allowed to eat anything or drink anything?
You are, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that nobody's measuring those purchases. You're saying if you're not on the clock, you can always go into a Starbucks, right? So you're saying that was a benefit that was given during the pandemic.
Right. Well, so they do measure how much we get while we're working. We get one free food item and one free drink, but they've been changing that a lot lately, and we haven't been a part of any of those conversations. So they recently changed it again, and then they took away the daily free food and free drink, and now we're back to only getting a free drink if it's during our shift, only getting a free meal if it's during our shift. So we had no say in that, no even heads up. It just showed up one day in our daily announcements that this is the new way of doing it starting today.
So what is Starbucks doing to try to suppress the union movement, to throw obstacles and impediments to make life harder for the two of you? What are they doing, and are they successful at all?
Well, I think the main thing they seem to be doing is lying to my coworkers.
About what?
Stuff about benefits, about what the union contract will do. There's a lot of talk from management at my store that once a union contract negotiation starts, everything's on the table. You could have anything taken from you. And the truth is that that's only true in the sense that if we want to give up anything in exchange for something else, we have that option.
It doesn't strip you Collective
Yeah.
bargaining doesn't start you at scratch, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. That's a great way to put it. Just because it's a possible that we would want to use ASU and get something else in return, which I don't think we would do. We have a lot of people who use that program at my store. Doesn't mean that that has to happen. The union is representative of what we want. It's not any other third party.
So you're saying there are people that are saying, I'm a junior at ASU because of this company, and I want to graduate. I'm afraid, get away from me. If I unionize with you, I won't get my degree. You're saying that's just not true.
Yeah, it isn't true. It's the union contract is just going to represent what we as a store body want. And as long as you communicate what you need, the union is going to, work to get you that and whatever more they can get you out of the contract.
So Kylah, you're almost a lawyer. I know that I read somewhere that Starbucks is taking the position, wait a minute, you can't unionize store by store. You need to unionize the whole thing, which I guess I only learned this from Cassie earlier off camera when you said that Amazon, that's amazing because Amazon's been doing it with huge numbers of people in warehouses, but you guys are just doing it store by store. So it seems to be easier to accomplish. But I'm wondering what's Starbucks' position saying, yeah, but that's too easy. You can't do it that way. You've got to get the necessary votes from all the Starbucks employees all over the United States and Canada. That argument, is there any legal merit to it? And is it working, Kylah?
No, there is no legal merit to it, and it is not working. They have been, I think they've been employing this as a tactic to just stall the election process. They have litigated in almost every store that has filed the same arguments, the same issues. They keep losing them. They're beginning to start conceding, and they're beginning to stipulate to new stores that are filing. But my store, we had our NLRB hearing, and we had to go through with those legal arguments, and it delayed our vote 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So we didn't get our ballots until 100 days after we had filed, which is a really long delay. And I think that's why they're pushing this meritless claim.
So I understand that not only when you use the word ballots, it's not just that they're arguing store by store, but I understand that they've also taken the position, a la the 2020 presidential election, that there's some defects in the balloting, right? That I don't know if they're saying the words election fraud, but they're saying things like, or they're not saying stolen election, but they're simply saying that we're not sure that we can feel confident in the legitimacy of the votes because it requires a certain number of votes, right, among each of the store employees in order to be certified as a union, and then to actually vote to unionize also requires a separate series of votes. So what is that argument about? What are they saying, that the ballots are defective, that people aren't signing them? I'm just curious, what is their legal argument?
So it depends on where you are, but they are certainly challenging ballots in numerous ways. For my store, one of the ways that our ballots had been challenged was because we have shift managers. Throughout Starbucks, all throughout the nation, there are shift supervisors. But in Massachusetts, we have shift managers, and that creates an issue of law as to whether they can be in a union. And we won our hearing, and we won the appeal. We won the case every time that our shift managers can vote. But when it came down to the actual vote, Starbucks again litigated the issue, brought it up, complained, and they were able to suppress 5 of the votes that we had in favor of the union to make it seem like we had less support than we actually did, because you only report the votes that weren't challenged. That's one way.
So you're saying, but that worked, but it didn't ultimately work.
It didn't ultimately work because we had, first unanimous votes. So they had no leg to stand on. They weren't able to completely overturn what we had accomplished. But they did want to minimize the support that we had. They wanted to make it less impactful, but they weren't able to do that because we were very quick to correct it, and we watched the ballots get counted. We knew that they were all yes votes.
So how much of this completely is traceable, emanates from the pandemic? In other words, if there were no pandemic, this night, what we're talking about would not have happened. Is that fair to say? And if it is fair to say, why?
Well, maybe we'd be having it on a different day, but I feel like, there's a lot of factors beyond the pandemic that affect this sort of thing. I know personally that like a lot of people were kind of felt pretty put down by, the last election cycle with the presidential election where, you start to feel a lot less represented by politicians. And, unionization is a way to make change in your life without just voting for someone and trying to get someone else to do it for you. I know for me, that's a big part of why I wanted to do this, is just not feeling like I had any real power in, affecting change. Affecting change in your workplace is a great place to start for me.
So, Kylah, let me just be more clear what I'm trying to get at. And I'm sorry, I don't think I was clear. What I meant about that was that the pandemic, for some reasons, and I guess they're not that so complicated, redefined the whole notion of what work looks like, right? That it forced a re-examination, right? I'm not saying that it's because of the pandemic that turned everyone here into essential workers, although I do think that there might be an argument that once one is called an essential worker, they should feel more valued. So if they're feeling devalued, there's something wrong, not unlike what you said earlier, Kylah, when you said, well, if I'm going to call me a partner, treat me like a partner. Well, if I'm an essential worker, then for God's sakes, treat me like one. So that's one aspect when I said to Cassie about the pandemic. But I'm also wondering whether it's cultural in the United States that the pandemic forced everyone to reassess their day job and what they wanted out of their day job and how they negotiate their day job, or whether they even have one, right? Because a lot of people quit, there's just people taking other types of benefits. The market is very fluid right now, and you can always switch jobs. Everyone's hiring seemingly. So I'm wondering whether there's just a kind of disruption here that the pandemic created this, galvanizing movement. And I'm wondering whether you would agree with some of that.
Yeah, I think that I think these are all really great points, Thane. I think that ultimately, I think we were already going to see something similar to this.
Which is Cassie's point, that we were
Yes,
on the road, something was
we're on
wrong.
the road. I think it was bubbling, but I think that the pandemic sped things up quite a bit. I think that there was accumulation of elements that really got us to this point, right? There's the overworking in our society. We have such long hours, such difficult days, and I think going into a pandemic where that's our standard of work, the folks who continued to work in person, the essential workers as they were called, which by the way, I think all workers are essential workers, but the people who were going to work every day, I think it became very obvious to them that these conditions are unfair if it wasn't already becoming obvious to people. I also think that there was a gradual change or a shift in the way that we view corporations. I think corporations did a really successful job at suppressing unions, at suppressing knowledge about unions, and ultimately discouraging the public in their support of unions. But I think that over time, we began to question just how much power these corporations hold over us and how little power we have in our own working conditions. So I think it all came together. I think there were a lot of other factors that led to this, but the pandemic certainly pushed it forward.
So the concept of a union, had it ever been introduced before at Starbucks? Has anyone tried and failed in some of the stores, like Seattle, where it originated?
Yes, there is a very long history of union attempts and union busting in Starbucks, beginning all the way to the first store in Seattle, which Howard Schultz himself made sure that was decertified when it had originally had a union, I believe in the 1978.
Because he bought an existing company called Starbucks.
Yes.
You're saying that store actually had a union.
Yes, and he saw to it that they got decertified. And then after that, the 1980s and on, there were multiple attempts to unionize. There were little popping up, drives in different areas, but they were able to be very quickly and swiftly suppressed because, as we're seeing now that it's being reported on such a wide scale, there is a lot of union busting tactics, and they're not afraid to toe the line on what's legal. And so I think that over time, we just kind of didn't hear about it, but there were many attempts. I think the most recent even in 2018.
So Cassie, you're a barista. I know what that is because I've gone to Starbucks. That's an important job. It is, and it seems like a difficult one. Although when we think of the American labor movement, right, the long history, I think, I was looking into this. First labor union was shoemakers. Before the 19th century, I think 1795 in Philadelphia. That's a nice little trivia pursuit question. That's the first. I think by the time we get into the Industrial Revolution, by 1850 or so, we're starting to see sort of the concept of a national union for mechanics, but it was always for skilled laborers, very specific laborers. I'm coming to you from New York, and 9/11 is a significant date for us, but there was another date in March of 1911, so it was only a few weeks ago was the anniversary, was what was called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which galvanized the labor movement. This was a factory in Greenwich Village that made shirtwaist coats. And in order to prevent, most of the women there were women who were seamstresses working there. In order to make sure they didn't take any cigarette breaks or take a break, they bolted the doors and a fire started. It's in a factory of garments, not hard to see how that could happen. And I can't remember the number of women that were killed in the fire jumping out of the windows. So that's actually an iconic day to this day. Whenever that date was, people leave flowers at the building. It's now a building that's occupied by NYU University. But it is iconic. And the reason I'm saying this is because when people think of the labor movement, they think of brawny guys. They don't think of baristas, right? They think of coal miners, steel workers, truckers, long haulers, right? I mean, even teachers, I guess. But the real thought of unions is, so I'm wondering whether this itself is sort of interesting, that what's the emergence of this new union movement is actually in a very interesting, very different industry, something very specific, a very high priced cup of coffee, a nice working environment where you can work, go surf on the internet. This concept that Schultz created has, it's shocking how successful it's been, but it's interesting to think about how ubiquitous Starbucks has been. And now the union movement is growing, emanating out of that, not out of factory workers, but out of baristas. Have anyone thought about sort of the cultural significance of that?
Yeah, I've actually considered this a fair bit in that, I feel like when you look at Amazon and Starbucks specifically, I think a big reason why those are the ones that are having such major successes is because those are businesses that companies can't just ship overseas. A lot of the, big industries like manufacturing have been taken elsewhere. And you look at, barista job, you're not going to ship a cup of coffee from China. You're going to have to make it on the spot. Amazon warehouse, that's a distribution hub. I think that's an important factor, is that this is the type of work that they can't devalue by bringing it to a country with, less strict labor laws and things like that. But, in terms of, the image part of it, I think everyone in the country has a right to unionize, and everyone in the country has, a right to, pursue better living conditions. And I also think a major factor for it is, Starbucks has always tried to be the progressive company. It's always been in their image. You mentioned the transgender health benefits. That doesn't happen at a different company. They have a image they put out, and as a result, they hired a lot of progressive people, and might be where it got them. But
you get what you paid for. They attracted a certain kind of a person, and both of you are good examples of that. Yeah, you're going to actually think really deeply and critically about the meaning of work, because you're progressive and what it means to be at a job, and should it be just a job? And so that's a really interesting point. Kylah, did you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose I think it's high time that we move on from that stereotype of what a union worker.
You don't need to have a hard hat.
Exactly. You don't need to, whether you're pouring coffee or concrete. As Cassie said, we are all protected under the NLRA. They don't discriminate against, coffee workers versus, someone who wears a hard hat. They're focused more on just workers. And we have the right to use that right, and we have the right to exercise it. And I think we deserve that voice. Unions do more than just gather a bunch of skilled laborers, as we call them. It addresses workplace safety, workplace dignity, inequality. There's so much more to it that all workers deserve. And like I said earlier about, I think all jobs are essential. I think there's also no such thing as an unskilled job. I think that what we're doing is very much a skilled job. I think that it takes a lot out of our baristas to do all of the multitasking that they do, all of the customer service that they do, emotional support, cleaning. I mean, all of the things that we're doing, it's a lot that some people can't do. And I think that's something we should all be proud of as baristas.
What about this as a youth movement? What's the effect of that? It seems to me that might have something to do with this too. We're seeing, younger people, students, right? I mean, the people working in coal mines were not getting online degrees at a college, right? Starbucks attracts a certain kind of a person, right? Who's very tech savvy. The customers usually sit there, spend all day working and drinking coffee and using the free internet. So I wonder whether that also plays, that the worker was potentially more sophisticated to engage in such an enterprise, to say, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't be happening to us. I wonder whether you think there's something about, you don't want to use the word entitlement, but there's a sort of a Gen Z entitlement, like, hey, this isn't right.
I think that is a factor. I feel like there's a lot of useful energy to everything that's going on. You look at Workers United, they pop up on my TikTok For You page every, day or so. And a big part of what I think is appealing to Workers United when you're looking at it is that it's run by baristas. It's run by people like me. Just their messaging, how they're campaigning. It's obviously, we've got a lot of other people involved. Like, we have our wonderful lawyer, Stan, who's amazing. But in general, you look at, just the energy behind it. I think it is, I would say youthful would be the right word.
Mm-hmm. I was actually interested in what you said, Cassie, earlier about, I love what you said, essentially saying, you can end the labor movement when it comes to manufacturing simply by closing a plant and having things manufactured in China or Hong Kong. But you can't do that with a cup of coffee. But it also makes me think that you have the benefit of being the face of a movement where people come in every day and look in your face, like they see you face to face. Years ago, the Daily Beast asked me to write about when Apple was revealed that Apple's chief manufacturer in China had these horrendous working conditions, just horrendous. And Apple, which basically was having people assemble phones 24 hours a day, and they were sleeping literally at the factory in order to accomplish it. But I think I remember saying in there, well, it's in China and Americans just don't seem to care. Right? That just the idea is, well, it's a terrible thing if you're Chinese, I guess, but I really want my phone. And if that's what Apple needs to do, but this is not something Howard Schultz can get away from, I guess.
Yeah.
because maybe these conditions aren't the same working conditions, but people still have to look you in the eye and either give you a tip or say, I appreciate what you're doing, go get them. It's a whole nother experience precisely because of the relationship and the fact that this is a face-to-face thing. This is one of those things that you don't dial in. This is one of those things can't be done through Zoom, right? In the end, you've got to pick it up and you got to look at someone. So I wonder whether you think that has something to your advantage here.
Yeah, it's definitely advantageous. When we first went public a few weeks ago, I did a lot of interviews with like Providence Journal and, local TV stations. And I had people coming in like a few times, like 5 or 6 times, and they would point to me and go like, "Oh, I know you from somewhere. Were you in the papers or something?" And, like, I wasn't aware I'm in the papers. And then I go and get the paper and I'm on the front page.
Wow.
Having local support really means a lot to us at the store level. Just having people come in, someone say, "Are you guys the store that's unionizing?" And then say, "Oh, okay, you are. Here's $5." And, that sort of support means a lot to us. But about like specifically like how protected we are under, specifically being somewhat more public facing. I think, that's a very big factor. If you put your store on strike, as some stores have done through Workers United, they see that, it's not happening in another country. It's not happening out of the view of the public. They're going to bring their car up and they're going to see, oh, it's closed down. Why is it closed down? And they can talk to you and, they can look into it. We're publishing this sort of thing over on like our Twitter and our Instagram, spreading information about what's going on. It's a bad look for Starbucks, everything that's been happening, regardless of, where you are. You might have heard about things like, unjust firings and our hours being cut and things like that.
Yeah. Kylah, you said earlier, well, and I guess you were also speaking as a almost newly minted lawyer, that corporate America has done a very good job of degrading the unions. So for instance, like between I think 1945 and 1970, wages tripled for unionized workers. And I think it was like 15 million Americans were members of a union when the country was much smaller. And now I think there's only 5 million people, and only I think 17% of the workforce is unionized, which is basically saying no one is really unionized. And that degrading has happened since like 1980, since the Reagan administration. I have such a strong memory of when the air traffic controllers were thwarted by the efforts of the Reagan administration. And they weren't even looking for money. They were saying, this is such a stressful job to land jets that we're having heart attacks. Like that was really their argument. Do you have any idea how stressful it is to land jets and make sure that they don't crash into each other and in the air? And the Reagan administration took a hard line, and it maybe goes to your point. But I'm wondering, I'm going to give you a statistic I just read, distressing statistic from a polling that was done by Politico, Kylah. It said that 76% of people, if you ask them, support collective bargaining, but only 50% support unions. Now, is that just a freak accident of statistics? Is it because people don't know what collective bargaining is, so they just support it? Because I'm thinking maybe it's something you just said before, that the word union has been degraded, and that's what they're responding to. Collective bargaining just sounds right, but unions don't sound right. What would you say to that?
I think that's exactly it. I think that the word union has been demonized by some and has been, made out to be something it's not. I think that
like calling someone a communist.
Exactly. And I think that, I think that there is some merit to people having skepticism over unions in the past, because unions have not always been the most progressive. But I do think that that's not necessarily the case anymore. I think that there have been big strides in the labor movement since. And so now when people hear the word union, they still think of it in that older sense, in the sense that they've been told to fear it. But collective bargaining is exactly what we're trying to do. We're just trying to have a voice in our company.
Mhm.
And so I think that, it's very important to educate folks about exactly what a union is, because they might stop as soon as you say the word union. But if you are slow and if you explain it, if you answer their questions and understand that they have that hesitation or fear, maybe because of something they've been told by corporate America, then you can work together to address that. And I've seen a lot of folks change from being anti-union to being pro-union, since this movement started, and I think that says something about the approach that we've used.
So Cassie, you already got congresspersons DMing you. You're like a rock star in Rhode Island. People know who you are. So both of you are plugged in, and of course we know that Kylah's store even helped you in unionizing your store. Where do you think we're headed? Not just for Starbucks, but do you see another industry? We know there's Amazon. We just read recently that there's at least one Apple store. And I think Apple's trying to respond by saying, what are you kidding? We give paid family leave. We also have a tuition reimbursement program. I mean, I think some of these corporations, I think that's the point, right? They're saying, wait a minute, we're progressive. Don't treat us like some textile mill in Birmingham, Alabama in 1961. We're a progressive company. Why are you punishing us for not being more progressive, right? Like we're already ahead of where we ought to be, or what other companies would never even put up with. So I'm wondering whether, clearly that's what the battle line is about. This is why I'm sure Howard Schultz came back. I think he's personally offended. I think you personally offended him. How dare you? I've given you all these benefits, and here you are mad at me. So I'm wondering, can you anticipate? Did you get a call from another industry that we should be on the lookout for that's next?
I mean, nothing specific has come my way. But I feel like if Starbucks can do it, Dunkin' can do it. If Dunkin' can do it, Baskin Robbins can do it. And if the coffee shops can do it, then Olive Garden can do it. It's sort of a thing that I hope it, grows out. And I think we have like a strong foundation here with Workers United. Everyone's very collaborative and, working together to help other stores, not just help themselves, which I think is, one of the most fun parts of this whole process has just been getting to know other people throughout, Rhode Island. I have people from the Rhode Island Painters Union who have reached out to me and stuff like that. Just seeing like, local support from the community. And, that support isn't just going to happen for Starbucks, it can happen for any other restaurant or service industry job.
So has, for the people who said, hey, how much does it cost for me to join this thing on a monthly out of my check? Are you up and running in that regard, that you're actually functioning as a union that takes dues, that has legal fees, right? You mentioned Sam, I think, is that his name? Cassie? Yeah, like that this we've reached a level of sophistication that you guys, you're really up and running, and you're doing the business of a union.
Precisely. I mean, we do have a union supporting us, Workers United, so they're already established in that.
And right. And that was the right union to join, right? That made sense for you.
Yes.
Right?
And I think that what we're doing now is I don't think a lot of us anticipated how big this was going to become. My store had filed in early December, and so that was when it was just Buffalo and Arizona. So it was early in, and we didn't really anticipate how quickly it would grow. So now we're starting to become that more national movement, working together. We give each other trainings so people know what unfair labor practices are. We train people on how to help other stores file. We hold weekly organizing meetings with all of our different organizers in the state. And we're really collaborating together to create this movement. But it's in those early phases. And anytime you have a grassroots movement, there's going to be those early phases. But I think that's the exciting part.
Now, you mentioned some of the stores are striking. That's neither of yours, right? We haven't reached that point. But of the over 200 stores in over 30 states. You're saying that people did pull up with their cars into a Starbucks parking lot and saw that it was closed. And then they asked the question why. You're saying this is not unknown, right? Let's take a question from the audience before we say goodnight to the both of you. You've both been so wonderfully interesting and charming. I can't believe anyone at a negotiating table wouldn't just give you everything you asked for. I would honestly to say that. This comes from a gentleman named Keith Long, and he says, Kylah and Cassie, executives at Starbucks represent the disparity in pay between executives and their employees nationally. Do you guys have opinions about reforming capitalism along the lines of income equalization, access to credit, childcare, and other benefits for entry-level workers?
Yeah, I think that this massive, not only pay disparity, but also power imbalance is something that we want to address. And I think that by unionizing, by helping other stores and other industries and other folks unionize and empowering them with that education of how they can exercise their rights, I think that we can make a fairly large difference, right, from that movement in terms of reforming capitalism. But I do think that there are so many other areas of reform that we need. But I think part of it is helping people see what that reform can be. And I think that goes back to your earlier point, Thane, about the pandemic and how, because of the change in our working standards, our environment, everything changing, we suddenly were able to kind of get a different perspective about what our work life is like. And I think the more we shed light and the more we're able to reflect and see that collectively, the more we're able to address that and reform capitalism. Hopefully one day take it all down, but...
Well, speaking of taking it all down, I have one more question before we get night. This is one from me, and it's inspired by what you just said, take it all down. I'm wondering, as you know, the American labor movement really sort of hits its gears during the New Deal. So from the period of the coming out of the recession, FDR's New Deal, up until around the 1970s, that's really sort of what I think it's clear is the high point of the American labor movement. I'm wondering whether Joe Biden's Build Back Better, whether his Green New Deal, whether Bernie Sanders' 2 presidential campaigns, 2 in a row, whether AOC's candidacy with its grassroots, whether this is what we should have normally expected, that it's not just the pandemic, that we're in a fever of progressivism that's being expressed in ways, when was it the first time Bernie Sanders ran for president, he was talking about free tuition, right? Everyone thought he was insane. Sounded like, he said, I'm a democratic socialist. Then you have members of the squad that identify themselves as democratic socialists. In my era, that would have been really hard to run for Congress using the word socialist or senator. Now it seems like you can say it. President Biden ran as a moderate, but he appears to be governing as a progressive in many ways. And I'm wondering whether you think that too created the conditions that made this possible, not just the circumstances of your employment, but the atmosphere that made an openness for people to say, this isn't right, and we can fix it through progressive means.
Well, I know personally, the second Bernie Sanders campaign was a big part of me, going a lot more leftward. And, having that loss occur was kind of, a big point I mentioned earlier, in that, you sometimes just feel that there's more you could be doing. I know that there was, talk from Chris Smalls that he felt that
just to be clear for the audience, Chris Smalls is the person who organized the first union for Amazon, right?
Yeah, he was the founder of the Amazon Labor Union. That he felt personally very unsupported by AOC. And while I agree that a lot of the grassroots movements getting these politicians elected instilled a lot of new values in especially young Americans, I think that once a lot of people feel that like, even though they've done all this work getting people elected, that they're not really seeing the change in their lives that they'd like to see. And, that comes from a lot of things. It comes from, just the general, bipartisan nature of what goes through Congress. But in general, people kind of want to make their lives better on their own. And unionization is a path towards that.
And I would
Kylah, last final words from you.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think it would be wrong to place this push and this change or even give part of it to the politicians in front of it.
Oh, wow.
Because I think that ultimately it's the people who get the politicians to lead those types of campaigns. A lot of politics is reactionary, and I think that's a reminder that we as individuals, we as workers, no matter who we are, we have so much more power than we think. Those deals, the Green New Deal, the politicians we're seeing right now, they're advocating for things they know we want, and they're only going to advocate for those things if we make it clear that that's what we want. So I think that unionizing is a tangible thing that we can do in our workplace, and it sends a very clear message to our politicians for how we want them to represent us too.
Wonderful way to end the night, Kylah. Thank you both, Cassie and Kylah. Wonderful last words. Beautiful. A couple of last words from us. A quick upcoming announcements. We'll say goodnight to Cassie and Kylah. Let's see, what do we got? Yes, upcoming events. We've got the FOLCS Film Series. We have a film Tuesday night conversation with the director of Happening, is the new film that's being released next week. It's from our partners, IFC Films. We're also co-producing this with She NYC Arts, which we've worked with before, great group. And that's on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. And we have Audrey Dewan, who's the director and the screenwriter. That's coming up. What else is coming up? Yes, the best thing we do. Honestly, every year, this is so popular. The 9th annual FOLCS Awards Night. It's the International Short Film Competition. We have films submitted from literally all over the world. The finalist films that you'll all get a chance, they're short films in any genre. They come from all over the world, young filmmakers, and it's just one of the more popular, fun things that we do. And we even give out, normally when we did it live, we hope to again, we have a red carpet, but we give out the FOLCSy Award, and you get to vote on the audience favorite. So you really sign up for this. You get to see really 8 interesting films from around the world, and you can vote for the audience favorite. We have a best screenwriter, best director, best female filmmaker, give out all kinds of cool awards. So that's coming up on April 28th. What else do we have? We've got, oh yes, former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman is part of our FOLCS Conversation Series. That's on May 4th. He has a new book on the centrist solution, which is probably a really good topic to talk about since we're so incredibly polarized now. And I think we have something else. Yep, we do. Exactly. We have another FOLCS Conversation Series, New York Times bestselling author Rich Cohen, who has been a FOLCS guest before. He's really funny and entertaining, by the way. He's got a new book out, The Adventures of Herbie Cohen, the World's Greatest Negotiator. It's a really funny book. It's a fun book. It's a sort of a memoir. It's also a manual on how to negotiate. So for our union organizers, it might not be a bad book for Kylah and Cassie. And then I think, yeah, of course, sign up for at folks.org to get updates for our future events. And of course, we know we're your favorite nonprofit, and we've been entertaining you free of charge all throughout the pandemic. So if you're feeling generous, we're always appreciative of the donations we can receive. I think somewhere on my left or my right, it's where you can donate. It's folks.org/donate. Cassie, Kylah, you're both so incredibly winning in every way. And so I wish you the best of luck. And I hope to bring you back in another capacity, both of you. I have a feeling that you'll be interesting to us in some place else, whether you continue with your unionizing activities or not. So Kylah, Cassie, good night. And good luck to your unions and the union movement that you associated yourself with. And I'm Thane Rosenbaum for FOLCS. Until next time, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.